So, I've been getting a lot of questions from folks that have known I've been working on this jewelry box for my niece as a graduation gift. And I've been describing the box and some of the cool features of the box and got some questions about it and figured a video walkthrough might be the interesting way to do it. We'll start and do a little bit of walk around on the box. First of all, it's primarily made out of cherry. The top is a mitered cherry frame with a bird's eye maple panel. You can see the darker banding around the bird's eye is cumaru, and then the finial is made out of chechen. It has a profile. I tried to find a profile for the finial that looked okay with a fairly geometric box. There aren't any curves on this box other than the finial. Then there's obviously a mirror in the panel, and the top tray has these dividers, and the dividers can come out if you want to, or you can take out some combination of them if you wanted to make a longer compartment here and here. You could take out this divider. They just lift in and out, interlock with each other. It's got a panel up here for rings and earrings and stuff that you might drop down in these slots, and it puts pressure on them and holds them in place. Like, you have to be able to get it fairly far down in there, because you'll see when the lid comes down it closes on that stuff, and so it can't be stuff that sticks up too high. You'll see in a bit, this is as much a piece of misdirection as it is a piece of useful hardware. Let's move around to the front. There is a little latching mechanism here, and if you look in the lid, you'll see there's a brass pin in there set in a cassette of cumaru. Cherry is a relatively soft hardwood, so I didn't want to, first of all, I didn't want to have visible hardware perforations from the front of the box, and so you won't be able to see it, but on the underside of this style there is another cassette right here that the latch mechanism assembles into. You can't buy these sorts of latch mechanisms, at least not one with the features I needed, and so this is all machined out of soft 360 brass, just regular sheet brass stock, 1/8 inch thick. So there's a cassette under here that inserts into the bottom of the style and provides a very hard wood for mounting all of the pins and latch mechanisms. And so you don't have to worry about cherry popping out, or giving way over time. The handles are cumaru, cut all from the same piece. There is a brass pin that goes through the front of each handle and is pinned into the front of either the drawer front or the frame up here. And that provides a little bit of stability. It's epoxied in there, provides a little bit of stability, so it's not just the glue joint of wood on wood here, in case that gets torqued at all. Let's see, walking around the box, you see it's a mitered frame, mitered carcass, and so there are keys inset here to strengthen those miter joints, and they happen on all four corners. I don't have a great light, so I won't go around the other side, but it did take care to match the grain of the cherry going around the corners. And I don't know, in this light, yeah, you can see the grain is matched across the drawer fronts. And I actually got a fairly decent match here on the corner, although there was a big knot hole, about a 4-inch wide knot hole in the board that I wanted to use for this. And so I cut to even dimensions on either side of the knot hole. And so while the knot hole piece is missing, there's 4 inches missing, I actually got a relatively decent grain match because the grain flowed around that knot and then came back to about the same distance in from the edge of the board. And so this ring that came up, there's 4 inches missing, before this grain line continues, but it actually looks okay. And I don't think you would notice. There are a couple of places right here where grain lines don't match up in the center of that knot, but on the outside edge of the knot they were much more uniform. Now, one thing you notice when I closed it, now it's locked again. It latched automatically, and there's no obvious mechanism for opening it. So the niece that this is being made for is a little bit of a trickster. She's kind of sassy. And so I wanted to build in some features to this box that, first of all, gave her a little bit of a hard time when she first had to open it, and were kind of a gee whiz factor. And so she's going to have to figure out how to open this. You get the advantage of seeing the finial pops off, and there is a magnet, a little rare earth magnet. Actually, it's a stack of 3 rare earth magnets glued in there. And then in the lid, there is another rare earth magnet epoxied in there so that it holds the finial in place. You don't have to worry when the lid opens. You don't have to worry about the finial falling loose. But the finial acts as a key. And on this latch mechanism in there, there is another rare earth magnet embedded. And if you turn it in just the right way, you can pop it open. So now, if you see with the mechanism in place, you see how it's being held in place by the magnet? And if I pop it up, I can affect that. But the weight, the shape of this piece of brass, it goes in and it makes an L. And then over here on the leg of the L is where that magnet is. You can see it's not centered immediately below this latch point. And so as you go in, you can lift it up. Now, one interesting thing that happened, I was making this at the last minute, and the first version of the finial that I made had a much bigger diameter here on the base, so that when it sat in place up here, this base piece was probably twice the diameter, right? A little bit different proportions. And I tested my latch mechanism, everything worked fine, did the final assembly on the box, and realized I hadn't tested it with the handle installed. And I went to move this up, and you see I can't just move it straight up. There's not enough room. This handle is installed just above where the magnet is, and it wouldn't actually let me unlock it. So I had to turn a new finial, and I turned one with a small enough diameter right here, so that if you go in and tip up, I don't know if I can do this and film it at the same time, but you stick it in and you turn up, yeah, and then you lift it with the finial. And so the motion you're going through down here is not this motion, it's this motion. And as you come up and lift the handle, it actually pops out. It actually ends up working okay. But that was a little bit of a scramble at the last minute. Now, as we move down into the box, it's got a couple of drawers. First drawer has dividers. The bottom down here that looks like felt is actually a spray flocking that works pretty well. The second drawer I left undivided for larger things, you know, bangles, necklaces, that sort of thing. But whether she will notice or not when she first gets the box, if you look at the box and the drawers are not full depth, right? There's some extra volume in this box that's unaccounted for. And we'll see if she notices that or not. If she does, one thing you can do is lift this ring tray out, and all of a sudden there's some new stuff in here. So there are a couple of secret boxes. Both of these are the same, and they both have a little rocker tilt mechanism. I don't know if I can get decent light in here or not. Again, this is just, it's lined with that, well, this is actually lined with a self-adhesive felt. just because I ran out of time to do the flocking. You need a good 18 hours for the flocking to set up and cure before you can wipe the excess off. And I didn't have that at the end, so I ended up going with felt. And again, these sit in there like this. I figured with a secret compartment like this, you didn't want sound to give it away, and so I wanted to line it all with felt, both for protecting whatever jewelry goes in there, or whatever other little tchotchkes and things she has, as well as for, you know, deadening the sound of anything that might be in there. And the second box is the same way. And I'm sure you've seen this sort of little rocker mechanism. You can't get great light there, but you can see the side piece. There's a piece that's glued in there. It's not actually cut as a rabbet, but the side piece goes in and then it angles down at the back, so that when I stick the lid on and press on the back has a relief that it can drop into, and that lets your thumb just pick it up. And I left a little bit of relief back here on the edge so that you can just sort of leave the lid in place, and when you're done you tip it forward and close it and drop it in that slot. Now that accounts for some of the lost volume. I don't know if you can tell, but the depth of this compartment, here, let's do it this way. If the box, the disadvantage of not having a video assistant. So if the box is in like that, you'll see there's also some lost volume there at the bottom, right? These boxes don't go all the way to the bottom. So what is in the space right down here? Well, I mean, I'm sure you know there's a hidden drawer there. How does it open up? If we look, you can actually see I did what I could to disguise this. It's a fairly tight miter joint, but the drawer pops open. There is a fake key here to sort of deceive the eye into thinking that that runs all the way through, but it's actually two separate pieces on both corners. And if we look up here, let's see if I can add a little bit of light to the matter. Hang on. There, you can see it. Right down there in the bottom, there are, and it's not going to be focused, sorry, I don't think, but those two shiny things, there are two dowels that penetrate that bottom panel, and each of them is surrounded by a coil spring. So this mechanism, zoom back out, this mechanism is actually it's a plunger. Now, I've just driven from North Carolina to Kansas, and we had lots and lots of rain, and this thing sat in the car overnight. Didn't get wet, but the humidity has caused this piece to swell. I'm going to have to do some final tweaking before I give it to her. But as you push down on this, now we look at the front. Oh, there's a gap that's opened up here. And if I set the camera down, let's see, can I do this and get decent? Zoom back out a little bit, yeah. So if I grab this drawer, I can now open it up. Now, because the swelling, I've got to pull this up manually. And that was not happening yesterday when we set out on the drive. And I'll be able to tweak it as we go. But now there's a full depth drawer. It came out of the bottom piece right there. It has a little spring brass, piece that goes in, and it catches on the underside in a little detent that's in the underside of this panel. So when you push it all the way back in, this brass is first of all being compressed against this top. See, it goes in and it gets pushed down by the dust panel that's in there. And as it goes all the way back in, and if I set this down and zoom out, We'll see. I don't know if you can hear this or not. No, it actually sealed. It's a fairly quiet seating of that brass when it clicks into place. And it pushes in. There is a spring that ejects that drawer, but when you push it in, that little piece of spring brass slips up into a little recess. And so the brass has been compressed. It just pops up into that recess, and then the drawer can't be pushed forward by the spring anymore. So that's kind of a cool feature. There's no handle on the front because then it wouldn't be secret. And when you're ready to be done, oh, I don't know if you heard that click or not. That click was actually the brass seating in place. When you're ready to close it all up, you can drop the boxes in place. You take the ring kit, and now there's no obvious secret panel for anything. I mean, it's not hard to find if you need to. And then you close it, and if you didn't know how to make the thing open up again,